I've abstained on English-only matters. Unfortunately, the way Westminster works, unfortunately the way the UK works, more often than not there are examples of legislation which describes itself as being English-only but has financial consequences for Scotland. So we will always stand up for the Scottish interest. I'm a great believer in English self-government. I think England will be a tremendously successful independent country, just as Scotland will be. But after a UK general election, all that everybody's now talking about is how a stronger SNP can get a better deal for Scotland. And for viewers at home, I think it underlines the point. The vote that really matters in this general election in Scotland is a vote for the SNP. A vote for any other party will not get the first-class representation that I hope we all want to see for our country.
Angus Robertson, I'll let you get away now to get ready for Nicola Sturgeon's speech, which we're expecting in a wee while. Back to the studio.
Brian, thank you very much. Now, at the conference centre, Brian also caught up with the party's deputy leader, Stewart Hosie. Brian was putting questions to Mr Hosie from voters. All this week, much like last week, there's been intense speculation about just how Labour and the SNP might work together or cooperate at Westminster after the election. This Conservative Laurel and Hardy poster appeared outside the conference centre this morning. Alex Salmond said this week that SNP MPs might vote down a Conservative Queen's speech. Would they be willing to vote down a Labour one?
What they've actually ruled out is a coalition.
A coalition, yeah.
And given that was the least likely outcome, he hasn't ruled out very much. If there was a confidence and supply arrangement, which would make sense for Labour to give them certainty, would have to agree on many things, and that would include a Queen's speech. If they wanted to do this on a vote-by-vote basis, then there would be no arrangement. There would be no agreement up front.
Would you vote against the Labour Queen's speech in those circumstances? That's what John wants to know.
There'd have to be a negotiation before that Queen's speech. Now, it depends what Labour offered. It depends what Labour said. It also depends what was in the Queen's speech. But can we just be very clear here? Because the politics of this are incredibly important.
Yes.
If Ed Miliband is seriously saying that he thinks he could run a minority government without speaking to the SNP, if the polls are to be believed, that's a very dangerous tactic for him to take. It's almost tantamount to saying if he doesn't get his own way with a minority government, he's going to carry David Cameron over the threshold at 10 Downing Street and usher in yet another Tory government. I think Ed Miliband needs to be very, very careful indeed not to go any further and rule out deals with progressive parties.
Let me be 100% clear here. The situation has arisen that there is a potential minority Labour government. They are the largest party. You are saying you would not simply vote for the Labour are saying we would defy the SNP. We would say to them our Queen's speech will contain increasing the minimum wage, etc., etc., and they would simply defy you to vote with that programme. You are saying there would have to be negotiations, there would have to be terms, there would have to be some form of discussion. Not a coalition, nobody's saying that. You're saying there would have to be discussions.
Well, it would be high-handed and arrogant for there not to be. Because we're not talking about Labour's approach to the Scottish National Party. I really don't care about that. We're talking about the will of the Scottish people. If they vote in the way perhaps the polls are suggesting, where the SNP have had a substantial lead over Labour for 6 months, where the UK polls are suggesting a hung parliament with the SNP in a pivotal position, if Ed Miliband is seriously saying he would discount the wishes of the Scottish people, he would discount the wishes of the 70% in Scotland who think an SNP-Labour deal is the most favourable outcome, I think that's a very, very high-risk strategy for the British Labour Party.
Imagine if the Conservatives are the largest party but you and Labour can combined outvote them. Would you wish to do so? Would you wish to prevent the Tories, even though they are the largest party, from entering Downing Street?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. Because remember, the biggest party doesn't get to form the government. That's the biggest lie of this campaign.
Not automatically, no.
Correct.
They're generally asked first.
They're asked first. Well, actually, more accurately, the previous incumbent is asked first.
Is asked first, that's correct, yes.
But this is about the ability to have a stable government over the next 5 years. If a Labour SNP arrangement could lock the Tories out of power, it would be bizarre if the Labour Party didn't want that to happen and became the handmaidens for another Tory government.
Unless Labour said the people have spoken, the Tories have more seats than us and they're entitled to form the government, given the verdict of the people.
Then they do not understand how a parliamentary democracy works. And if there was the possibility of a progressive SNP Labour administration as opposed to a Tory one, if Labour think they're doing badly now, if they were to be the handmaidens of another Tory government, I don't think they would know what hit them.
To be clear again, if again, back to John's initial question.
Yeah.
Situation is Labour are the largest party. Situation is Labour are saying no coalition. We accept that. You accept that. The situation is Labour are saying we're not going to talk with you guys. We're not going to deal with you. You are our sworn enemies. We fought you all the way. We're not going to talk with you. Would you then bring them down?
Oh, this isn't about bringing people down. I don't think that's what the dynamics would be like on the 8th of May, assuming the polls are correct. I think there's a lot of people in the Labour Party and down south who vote Labour who like our anti-austerity plan. Many people who vote Labour who like our plan not to waste £100 billion on Trident. Many people in Scotland, some of whom used to support Labour, who like our idea of more power for Scotland. I cannot imagine or conceive of a situation where we could lock the Tories out of power, where Labour would not want to have a serious discussion.
But you want a serious discussion. You won't just vote for them willy-nilly. You won't give them a blank cheque.
Well, we've been very clear, and I think it's right. We've been open and honest and upfront and transparent with the public about this. We may be able to help a minority Labour administration, but we have set a real end to austerity, real powers for Scotland north of those proposed by the Smith Commission, and we cannot countenance £100 billion on Trident, very popular with Labour supporters. This is where we're coming from. We've been very open and upfront in advance about this, and I think Labour would be rather foolish if the situation turns up, as the polls might suggest, that they did not want to discuss around these areas.
We take you finally, Stewart, to questions from on the referendum, the issue of the referendum. Bill Curl says, do you accept and agree that the referendum last September had binding consequences for the Scottish Government? A clear majority of the Scottish people voted for a continuance of the Union.
The result was extremely clear indeed. We have said there cannot possibly be another referendum without a clear mandate and a clear will of the people, and we've been equally clear that this election, 2015, is not about independence. It's about holding Westminster to account and ensuring they deliver the Devo Max, the maximum devolution, the closest thing to a federal state they promised, Westminster parties promised, prior to the referendum.
So independence and a referendum, they're not on the table at this election, this UK election?
Absolutely not. This is about Westminster delivering. Remember, Gordon Brown said, if we vote no, they'll be the closest thing to a federal state within 1 to 2 years. The Scottish people were sold Devo Max, and the majority understand that to be everything except defence and foreign affairs.
I think he added the closest thing to a federal state that is possible within this United Kingdom. In other words, within the constraints of the existing setup.
Indeed, but the closest thing to a federal state nonetheless. What's been offered by the Smith Commission is not that. Our opponents set the bar high. The job of the Scottish National Party is to deliver big in May and become the guarantors of those substantial new powers.
But Mr Hosie, Gary MacDonald from Edinburgh is upset. He says you promised pre-referendum you would accept the outcome, you consistently refuse to do so.
No, we came to terms with the result very quickly. We did accept the result of the referendum, and I couldn't have been clearer in my last answer. This election is not about independence, and there cannot be another referendum until the Scottish people will it. That is not on the table at the general election in 2015.
But it could be in 2016 at the Holyrood elections.
Well, it depends what Westminster does. If they deliver to their promises, then they deliver to their promises. If they do not, and they don't disappoint me, but they begin to let down those who voted no for more powers, then we need to listen to what the Scottish people say.
And bring forward a further referendum?
No, let's wait until the Scottish people say what they say. Let's wait until we get the general election 2015 done, and let's wait and see if the promises made will actually be delivered.
Are you suggesting if you have a referendum, if you have a majority rather in 2016, in Holyrood, it is more likely than not that there would be a further referendum if Westminster is not delivered in the interim?
Well, what I'm saying is the Scottish people would have to demand a further referendum. I don't think we should even be getting into that territory, forgive me, until we've seen the outcome of this election and what Westminster really delivers to Scotland.
Okay, perhaps a final question. David Yorkston asks, who is actually leader of the SNP, Sturgeon or Salmond?
Nicola Sturgeon is the leader of the Scottish National Party. I'm the deputy leader of the Scottish National Party. Angus Robertson is the leader of the Westminster Group. And while we all very much hope and expect and want to welcome Alex Salmond being returned to Westminster, Nicola leads the party.
Alistair Comey on the same question. Would it be yourself, Angus Robertson or Alex Salmond being the main speaker for the SNP at Westminster, presumably in coalition talks?
Nicola will lead the coalition talks. She made that perfectly clear. But let me say one other thing. If the former First Minister is returned, and I very much hope and expect he will be, every other party would give their eye teeth to be able to deploy a big beast like Alex Salmond back to Westminster.
So you're not suggesting there should be a period of silence on this party? He has been rather voluble on various topics.
I think everything the former First Minister said has been in tune with everything Nicola and I have said. How that's reported is a matter for other people.
Stewart Hosie, the Deputy Leader of the SNP there. Before we hear from Nicola Sturgeon, the Leader of the SNP, let's just have another quick chat with Brian, who's at the conference centre. Brian, that was a very interesting final question there. In terms of Nicola Sturgeon's leadership, as she continues to put her imprint on the party, how significant will this speech be, do you think, as she moves on from the Salmond period, if she can?
I think she will set out the strategy for the UK general election. You wouldn't expect anything else. I also think with regard to this business of coalitions or pacts or deals, it was intriguing to hear Stewart Hosie say that they wouldn't give a carte blanche to Labour. They would expect discussions and negotiations. But I still insist again that when the SNP are setting out terms like the no update of Trident, more powers for Scotland and an end to austerity, as they describe it, what they are trying to do is not fully pre-negotiate a coalition. What they're trying to do is trip up the Labour Party now, right now, in this election, in order to obtain further seats for the SNP. They're trying to trip them up over economic planning. They're trying to trip them up over powers for Scotland. They're trying to trip them up over Trident. They are inviting the Labour Party. They believe that these are totemic issues that could potentially cause difficulty for the Labour Party, and they are trying to use them now rather than setting them out as issues only to arise in the event of a hung Parliament.
Thank you very much. We'll let you get to the auditorium now for Nicola Sturgeon's speech. Still joining me here in the studio is Professor John Curtis from Strathclyde University. John, first of all, you were very interested in that point, actually, just about how the SNP might be holding Labour to account. You know, they do want perhaps deals done before the Queen's speech.
Well, I think the difficulty the SNP face, and I think you saw that in the way that Stewart Hosie was dealing with Brian's questions, is that they've now made it very clear that they will vote out any attempt to form a Conservative administration after May the 7th if they're in a position to do so. That inevitably, however, has the consequence, and it raises the question, well, OK, so therefore the only game in town is for you to be able to support a Labour administration, which inevitably leads to the question, well, therefore, why does the Labour Party need to talk to you in order to form that administration? Because you've already told us you're not willing to keep the Conservatives in power. And I think, that's therefore why Stewart Hosie was having to resort to this argument, well, they would be high-handed to do so, it would be risky for them to do so, etc., etc. But you will notice he did not say that, yes, if the Labour Party did not talk to us, that we would then vote that Labour government down. Because the truth is, if the SNP were to vote a Conservative administration down and to